inclusive balance, right? I don't particularly like that framing because it implies there's this equal distribution of, work to personal life to other things. And I don't think that's really realistic or sustainable. So I realize there's no perfect set of tips that somehow, creates equilibrium for everyone. So instead, a little bit of the way I'm going to approach this today and share these techniques that have made a difference in my life and my clients' lives is to think about these skills more as life navigation. It's not so much about attaining balance or putting work in this box and personal in this box, but this paradigm shift towards life navigation where we're constantly in discovery and acquiring new tools, right? Life tools as we face challenges, changes, good things, even in our lives. So I find this a little more of a fluid, kind of dignified way, a thing for perfect balance. So knowing there's no one prescription for everybody and how they seek, integrating their full selves, the techniques I want to share are on a continuum of smaller things you can do for yourself to more moderate, gratifying gains, I call them, to really game-changing things you can do. And I make a big suggestion for one of the things you can do in that area, managing your energy. So if we look at this framework kind of from the bottom up, we're going to talk today about leaning into your strengths, the importance of even something like a don't-do list, asking for help, and some of the research on asking for help. It's different than you might think, maybe not what you're thinking. And we'll then look at being able to clarify and set your boundaries routinely as a life skill, to invest in your support net, and then the big one at the top, learning to manage your energy, to be more aware and purposeful of that. And so I'm excited for all of these. There's something for everyone. Maybe you only have the bandwidth or the energy to think about something smaller. That's okay. Or maybe you really want to look at something that's going to have a bigger impact. We're here for it. All right, so let's talk about this idea of leaning into our strengths. We've certainly touched on this before, and I'm always going to be encouraging you to do this. But the reason I think it's important is so often when we think about self-care and well-being, we tend to think of things we can do outside of work. We tend to think of personal life, things we can do to almost offset the impact of work. And what I want to say is using your strengths is actually a form of self-care that you can use on the job, in your day. But it's rarely going to land, gift wrapped in your lap. It's really something you have to steer yourself and others toward. And of course, this matters. Sounds great, doesn't it? We all want that. But the other thing that's important to know is that it really does pay to be distinctive in our strength. One Oxford University study found that those people who had a strength considered rarer, more uncommon, more unique were the happiest. So as you think about your own skill set, your own strengths, what is something you could really make your own? Maybe it's because you are a project manager, but you have an engineering, background or degree, or maybe it's that you work in banking, but you've had some really valuable experience in tech. How could you use your hybrid set of skills to stand out, to do something truly distinctive? And so I want to hear from you all and just hear, even in a number, on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is a lot, how much do you use your strengths? How much would you say you're using your strengths at the moment? Are you doing this a lot, a little bit? Let us know in a number in the chat. I'd put myself at about a 4 right now. I feel good about using them, but I could be a little more discriminating about what I say yes and no to. Seeing lots of 3s, even the 3.5, people using them, having contact with those strengths, but maybe not a majority of the time. And again, seeing 3s across the board. Great reflection. I talked about the fact that these don't land gift wrapped in our lap. So what are some of the things you can do? I want to encourage you to steer people at work towards your strengths. I remember in one of my management consulting jobs, I was tasked with doing all of the analytics for our little department. And I absolutely hated it. I mean, I had an allergy to that kind of math, but this was giving me the Sunday scaries. I had that pit in my stomach, and my dislike of it made me even poorer at performing this. And it wasn't until I asked my manager, Suzanne, can I focus a little more on report writing, on the blogs that need to be written for our department? I think I could make a bigger impact if I did those things. And it was like, oh, like this whole other side of me woke up. And that's so often what happens when we activate a strength. Like suddenly had my mojo, was using my all. How can you correct it? If you're maybe over focusing on areas that represent weaknesses or complete non-interest, could you invest in some training or request some training to get even better at that? And how about advocating to get with teams who could benefit from your strength? Maybe even people who are better at that strength than you. So you, through observation, through exposure, can really elevate your game. Okay, this is something we can do for ourselves. It's a beautiful thing, and it's a form of well-being and self-care. I think you're going to like this next one, this small gain, because it's about doing less, not more. And I know a lot of people's knee-jerk reaction to this is to kind of say, oh, sure, that's great for somebody else who actually has tasks they can give up, but not me. I can't. And having thought that way a long time myself, I wanted to share such a liberating quote with you. I love this quote from Minda Zetlin, who writes on this. And she says, once you accept you have more to do than time to do it all, that is actually a liberating concept. This realization forces you to acknowledge there are lower priority items you will likely never complete. You hear that word, never? Delete those non-essentials, put them on your not-to-do list, and commit to letting them go. Boom, right? So many of us are in pursuit of that caught up email inbox, or the physical paperwork is all gone through and sorted and checked off and finished. How about changing our framework to finished doesn't exist? Giving ourselves permission instead to set some limits, to designate things as don't do's. So again, I want you to think critically about this. Okay, it's part of your job to say no to some things. So could you eliminate a meeting series you're not absolutely needed in? or get some assistance if you're doing things maybe outside your role. Maybe admin is not your main role, and yet you're being kind of drug into that arena. Can you get help and support? You've got to ask for it. If you're spending a lot of time on consultation with others, like emailing or them calling you for certain information, can you put that in an accessible drive on the intranet for their access so they can do it without you? How about even just basic correspondence that takes up our time, reading, deleting in our email inboxes? Can you opt out? Even as a 10-minute exercise of things you don't need to be on. Thanks for including me this. Please take me off the distribution list. I don't need to be on it any longer. And as you do this, you're going to be saying no to other people, right? You're going to be putting things on that don't do list. And so as you say no, I hope that you'll stop for a moment and reflect on, what am I going to lose if I say yes to this, right? Your energy is finite. You don't have unlimited energy. So what will you lose if that person stops you in the hallway, says, hey, can you stay late? What will you lose? Is it your mental health and well-being? Is it a dropped ball in a relationship you have? Is it a commitment or promise you made to somebody else that's going to suffer? Is it your sanity? It's so important that we be real about these things. So I encourage you to do that, to buy yourself more time, to maybe answer the commitment. Can I do it or can I? Let me give myself 5 minutes to contemplate this and weigh it before I answer. And of course, actually say no, not I don't think so, or maybe. And if you must give reasons, keep those reasons short. Or as a lot of us know, people will start bargaining with you. They'll try to solve the barrier, the problem that you're putting out there. So better to keep it succinct and short. And one more small game, okay, maybe not so small, but it is a little everyday thing that you can do more often. And it's to ask for help. My mom, when I was little, and we talk together about, when I was a little kid, she says to me, you were fiercely independent. You didn't want to be fed. You wanted to do everything yourself. And I took a certain amount of pride in that and enjoyment in that personality type. And it's kind of stayed with me. But here's the thing I've learned from researching leadership, learning from some of the best, having some wonderful mentors. And that is, the most successful people actually ask for help the most often. So this idea of do it yourself, power through on your own, isn't actually helping you as much as you think, right? Because when we do this, we deprive ourselves of feedback, of input, and if we're having a problem, of somebody curing our pain, right? So I want to share a few examples to encourage you to ask for help, and also kind of spotlight a little bit of research that I think, again, might surprise you. But I'm talking about, for example, maybe when you're not getting the support you need at home. What does asking for help sound like? It could be as simple as this. Right now, the situation isn't working for me. You're telling them this is a non-starter. And I want to brainstorm how we can work together better. Notice there's clarity in this request. You're telling them it's not sustainable, and you're kind of saying, let's redesign it. Maybe a little different from when you're on a project, and I think we've all been here, and you don't feel set up to succeed, right? You may be given vague instructions or maybe changing instructions. You know, I'm unclear on the details of the project. Can we set a time to sit down, talk it through, make sure we're on the same page? Again, you're making your intent clear, that you want this to go better, and your request to make a plan, right? To make a plan. How about when you make a mistake? It's so important when we make a mistake. Can you think a step forward to try to formulate a solution? It's okay that you made the mistake, but can you think ahead, paint a picture of what needs to happen next so you can make a specific ask of someone else, right? This kind of framework helps you do that. You're not just running to them like with your hair on fire for them to fully solve it. You're coming with some solution. And one more, I can't tell you how many people I hear this exact message from. They're feeling underwater. They have too much to do for the amount of hours they have in front of them. And sharing that. Is there a resource I can tap or use? This is not the only way we can handle feeling overburdened, but it's definitely one way. Another thing you can do is issue that cautionary warning. I'm really concerned about how we're going to sacrifice quality on this project if we say yes to it. So signaling the consequence of keeping things how they are or adding more work to the plate. Okay. So I want to ask you in the chat, why the heck is it so hard? And I'm sorry, I'm missing a word on the screen. Why is it so hard to ask for help? What do you suspect? If this has ever been you in the chat, let us know. Why is this so hard? Showing vulnerability, Christina. Yeah, you're right that we kind of don't have it figured completely out. And I might add to this list that, sometimes it's not always a negative. Sometimes it's a positive, like the point I shared. The fact that when I was a kid, it was almost a point of pride to do it yourself, to be self-sufficient. Chelsea saying, personally, it's a pride thing. I've been hurt by many people in the past who I asked for help from. So now I pride myself on being able to do things myself. I really get that on a cell level. I can understand it. And I appreciate your honesty. Alasia, don't want to seem incapable. Yeah, what judgments might somebody make if I ask them for help? And Anissa, especially for women, we're supposed to be able to do it all. So maybe there's some feeling of stigma in, can you help me out here? Or I just can't manage it. Let's really acknowledge those and be choiceful about what beliefs we want to take with us, right? Some of these might hold us back from asking for asking what we need and want from others. Well, I was excited when I saw this study. This is a recent study about favor type requests. And what it showed is participants who are asked for help from a colleague actually increased their liking of that colleague, okay, relative to the baseline in this study. So isn't it interesting that when you ask for help, people actually like you more? And where there was some warmth, what they're calling sociability in that colleague, maybe a closeness or an initial rapport, it also increased that that likability. So for any of you who might be thinking of the risks, what about the burdens? I'm worried about putting on somebody in asking for what I need. I hope that you'll look at the flip side to it as well, which is your vulnerability in saying, I can't do this all, or I could use your help, or can you help me correct X mistake, is actually building some bonds and trust with that person. It's deepening the relationship. It's increasing your likability. So a really important one. And thank you, Katya, for also sharing your take on it, that I don't know how to ask for help. I hope some of those scripts I shared with you could be an initial start that maybe you could make your own, put in your own voice. All right, let's move up the ladder to those gratifying gains. We've looked at some of the smaller wins, but how about this biggie of clarifying your boundaries? Clarifying your boundaries. In the groups coaching sessions I've done and these webinars, we're constantly revisiting this idea that we are teaching other people how to see us. Daily, in everything we do, we're teaching other people how to view us. And when it comes to boundaries, our boundaries teach others what our limits and our needs are. So this is something, again, a life skill, not just a work skill, that can have huge effects. And so what am I talking about? We all have an idea of what boundaries are, but I really mean taking responsibility. That's a big foundation of this. Not hoping, wishing upon a star somebody will know or guess my boundary, but really taking responsibility for stating it, speaking up for yourself, communicating if something's not working or you have a desire, a need, and having that healthy sense of entitlement that you're allowed to have fences around certain things. You're allowed to protect. You're allowed to, say no, right? Big part of this. So just to get a little more granular about this, I hope we can think about some of the different kind of boundaries, like emotional boundaries, for example, right? This is about our feeling state. And it might involve things like protecting ourselves from that gossip or that really negative person who tends to come around. Different from intellectual boundaries, where we might be saying, I really need to stop watching the news, for example, 5 hours a day. It's affecting me, being choiceful about the content that we consume, maybe what we read, social media type feeds, or again, challenging a certain topic of conversation. And again, this is different than the physical ones, which may be more about our space around us. Or, for example, our schedule, negotiating with a boss how we work. This is really what works better for me and gives me the boundary that I need. I'm not going to log on after this time at night. Okay, that may be a physical boundary that we want to assert. So my question for you is, what set of boundaries feels most important for you, most meaningful, and that you might want to work on strengthening first? Is it that emotional set of boundaries, that feeling state, protecting that? Is it more the intellectual boundaries, what you consume or spend time on? Or is it those physical boundaries, maybe honoring more what your body needs, how and when? What is it for you? Tell us in the chat. What is that set of boundaries you want to work on? And I think where I'm falling in all of this is intellectual, because, back to that, do it all yourself. Sometimes the tasks that most pull my focus, are not things I have to do. So some of those intellectual boundaries, I think, are important for me to honor. And it sounds like for Anissa too. And for Katya, emotional. Yeah, that's wonderful and can make a huge difference in your life when you start being a guardian of your emotional boundaries. I'm seeing from Christina 50-50 with an emotional and physical, because you keep those feelings emotionally and take it home with you, but physical because you give too much time to others, their goals, projects, or tasks where you risk your own. And that's really beautifully said. And I think it's such an important reflection. That giving tendency is wonderful. But do you have enough left over for yourself? Right. And we're going to get to that more in just a moment. Chelsea saying intellectual as well, putting up those boundaries around what you consume, what you think about, what you surround yourself with. Well, I think one of the really powerful things we can do as we are looking at this topic is to study what I call your drops, those moments that your boundaries really lapsed. And to ask yourself, what was underneath that? What was maybe the mindset, the pressure, the expectation that caused that to happen? And I can think in my own life about a situation, a particular March that I will never forget. I was newer on the scene in my business, and March is Women's History Month. And so lots of my clients, are women-focused events who are hiring me. And this one March, I got a lot of interest, more than I was expecting. And I said yes to all of it, to every inquiry, every, event. I said yes to it, and I put it on the calendar, and my calendar looked a lot like this yellow set of Post-its, like all over the place, frantic. And I went through it that month. I delivered all those events, and it felt like sprinting a marathon. I was pretty miserable. I was incredibly tired. I didn't even feel like I had my best to bring to all those events. And I look at that now, and when I ask myself, what was the force, the expectation, the mindset that enabled that to happen, it was the scarcity mindset of this could all go away. Look at what a windfall of exciting opportunities have come in. You better say yes to all of them. You're lucky to have this. I'm sure you recognize this line of thinking. But that's a really important watch out for me, that drop, because it tells me I can fall victim to that sometimes. How about you? What is a time maybe you had a drop, and what was underneath it? What enabled that to happen? Might be a really important thing for you to think about and process and, be mindful of as you allocate your time. And by the way, if you have questions on any of these topics we've been talking about around the juggle, please do send them to us in the chat or the Q&A. We're going to have definitely some time at the end for free-flowing Q&A, but please stop me if there's something you want to know more about or a specific question you have. I love this quote from Carl Sandburg, the ultimate reminder, right? That time is the most valuable coin in your life. You and you alone will determine how that coin will be spent. So be careful you do not let other people spend it for you. Boundaries help us prevent that, right? Prevent other people spending our coin, our time for us. designating where our energy goes. And so let's talk about this other concept of investing in your support net. We've certainly talked about things like networking and the importance of it. But I'm really talking about it here as a life skill. Okay, not just being strategic as you build, alliances and networks at work. And that's important, again, to our well-being. We know depression and anxiety tend to go up when we are lonely. They feed off loneliness and isolation. Not just that, but there was, again, a new study done during the pandemic that showed all these negative impacts of feeling loneliness. But here's what's really cool. They showed on the flip side that there's this positive protective factor to things like social support, feeling a sense of belonging in pockets of our lives, and when we have self-compassion. So that these things act like a kind of shield, right, to us, to make us more resilient, to make us better at coping with life's ups and downs. So even though sometimes we can hear, get out there and network, get out there and build community. And it's kind of like, yeah. I know that's good advice, but so what, or who cares, or what's the rush? Realize some of the ways this is giving you immunity. This is fueling your well-being. So not just a nice to have, but a great to have. And look, there's different ways we can do this. Sometimes I know when I'm, actually planning an event with some of my closest girlfriends right now, sometimes the thought of the planning can just paralyze you and stop you in your tracks, right? Because it feels overwhelming to initiate it, to start it, to start it from scratch. But I want to make it really simple, just like the same way we looked at the scripts in terms of asking for help. Reaching out to that person, it's casual. It can be casual. It's not like a marriage proposal. Lead with what you're asking for. If you're asking for a meeting, lead with that. I'd love to take X time together. This is really important. This next one, have a point. I have had a lot of lovely, nice people write to me, but in a very vague way, where I'm not sure what they want to talk about. And then it makes it harder to evaluate if this is a yes or a no. So make it easy for them. Tell them, I'd love to introduce myself since I'm new on this team, or I'd love to hear about your experience moving from project management to consulting, or I'd really like to talk with you about your career path and your experience. Okay, this way you're giving them a really good opportunity to make an informed, yes, hopefully. While you're in there, maybe you've got the meeting, they said yes. You can use the 70-30 rule, which is about listening 70% of the time and talking 30% of the time. Yes, you want them to get to know you as well, but don't feel that pressure to have to take over. Be curious, be interested, be open in them. And of course, sustain it after the fact. I think it's great when you've had a positive meeting with somebody and you punctuate that meeting, telling them you want to do it again. Signal the future. Let's do this again. Let's make this not just a one-off. And then as you go, think about how you can bring a generosity mindset to them, and what maybe they're trying to do. So being willing to say, I found a resource I thought you'd like, or I know you want to build your thought leadership. I saw this call for presentations or call for articles. I thought you'd like to see it. Okay. I think this can be game changing to reach out to people, to make good use of their time. to come across as a leader yourself. And maybe most important, to build that connection that lasts, right? So this person is part of your support net. Some other fun things I really like to do with my support net. Okay, in some cases, this is fellow authors and speakers who, might have a similar experience to me day to day, to celebrate our wins. Talk about a feel good, right? And a motivator and something fueling, celebrating our wins together. This is something that you can do and make yourself known for on your team. Maybe you're acknowledging and recognizing and praising somebody else, or maybe you're just like fist bumping and pumping with your team more often. Doesn't have to be an epic win, to celebrate it. We talked about the rapport building, the likability boost that happens in asking for help. How about that as a simple way to develop your support net? And I think one other one that we sometimes overlook, enjoying some self-care, some well-being with that other person. Can we take a walk together? Can we have lunch outside while we discuss this? Can we have a mutual win session where we both celebrate something really positive that's come our way? Don't forget, we all really appreciate efficiency. So why not consider combining these things? Daring yourself to bring more of that self-care into your workday, not waiting for later. All right, and here is a biggie, managing your energy. Managing your energy. And I think this is one of the highest gain life changes that we can make. And it's not asking you to do a lot differently. It's asking you to think about your energy spend in a different way. So let's look at doing that, not just spending your energy, but really maximizing the energy that you have. And I want to share this quote because I think it's a really interesting way to think about your time. This is from Eva Wong. She's an entrepreneur, a successful founder. And she says, I approach work life like making a budget and sticking to it. I set a limit for how many nights away I spend each week, and I don't exceed it. And I don't feel guilty about it either, because that's what I budgeted. If it's something important to you, you should be strategic in how you approach it. To me, this is all about recognizing the many choices we have when it comes to our energy, right? In her case, she has to do some work travel with nights away, but maybe for you, it's something else, right? That you have to dedicate and decide what to do. I think what's really refreshing about her message is she makes a choice and then honors it, and notice what she's not saying is, I'm mired in guilt. I'm a victim of my schedule or my time. She's really the creator of it. And I think there's something wonderful we can take from her approach to her life management. And so when I was at Deloitte, I had the incredible pleasure of getting to help launch managing your energy kind of program at Deloitte. So I was one of the first to get to roll it out under our chief well-being officer. And when I first saw some of these prompts that I'm sharing with you, they bowled me over. And I was leading a cohort of people through this program. And when I asked this first question, who or what gets the best of you? It was amazing how many people said, like, no doubt, work. I remember one man talking about getting home, having just zero energy to smile, to have a sense of humor, with his family, to kind of be attentive to his kids. I remember another woman saying, it's most definitely work. I'm out of shape. And she was talking about the fact that she was trying to keep up with her kids in her life on the weekend. And it became this glaring realization for her that, like, work is what's getting the best of me. Family, in her case, was getting the leftovers. And so I hope you'll start thinking about the finite amount of energy you have in a day. This is not a renewable resource that we can just pull more of out of thin air. How can you start pacing your energy on purpose? Okay, spreading it through your day to what matters most to you, so that you can show up for the people that you love, so that you can do a respectable job at work, but have something left over for yourself, right? Maybe it's just for you. It's not for others. It's so you can do what's important, or you can manage your health. So I hope this is something you'll think about. How can you really manage the pace, spread that energy out, and decide in some cases to be selectively excellent? I'm not going to try to be excellent at everything or to everyone. I'm going to be selectively excellent. This project really matters. I'm going to give this my all, or 80% of what I'm capable of. But it's really important when I'm noticing at 2:30 p.m. maybe that I could keep doubling down and going hard, that it's time to ease up, to take my foot off the gas, to leave something left, to leave something in the tank. So how can you do this? One of the things I want to encourage you to do is take more consistent breaks, particularly before or after a really exhausting task, that takes more from you, that's taxing. This is a lifelong challenge for me. Don't normalize stressing and rushing as your default state, as just the way it is. Check in with your body. None of us are robots. Last time I checked, checking in with your thirst, your breathing, your stiffness in your body, maybe the sense that your feet want to move, checking in often enough that you can hear those urges and act on them. Here's something else you can do. We talked about, intellectual boundaries, but something intellectual we can do to fuel our energy is to let ourselves go deep on things that bring us a lot of enjoyment or excite us. So an interest, a passion, letting yourself really geek out on that and immerse yourself in it can often give you more energy, right? Leaving that comparisonitis behind. There's no reason your pace should look exactly like his or her or their pace. So letting that be irrelevant. And one more, creating routines. We know that we use up less cognitive and sometimes emotional power when we have a go-to, when we have a routine that we can follow. That's one way you can be choosy about your energy. Maybe you have a couple favorite breakfasts you make and you kind of keep them in a rotation for a while to create an easier routine. Or you have a clothes, as my friend calls it, like uniform, where things kind of look similar, but you swap out colors. You make it easy for yourself because it's not a life choice that you want to dedicate a lot of energy to. Maybe even your startup and your shutdown routine when you're working day to day. Okay, creating that routine can save you some time and sanity. We've talked about this once before, but I think a really great part of managing your energy is letting go of that FOMO, that fear of missing out. What are they doing without me? Shouldn't I be at that meeting? Shouldn't I stay logged on to the computer while I'm on vacation? All of these things. And instead embracing that JOMO, that joy of missing out, that idea that you're judicious with your time, with your energy, okay? And that you can actually allow yourself to enjoy sitting one out rather than trying to be at all the things and part of all the things. And so I think a big part of this here is saying yes to yourself, saying to yourself, permission granted. You do not need to do it all. And I love seeing the love for JOMO. It's always a freeing thing every time I see it. So we looked at some of those smaller wins for building your self-care, your well-being, learning to juggle in new ways, those gratifying gains, all the way up to that bigger bet of really looking at your time, your exertion in terms of energy and how you spend it. And I wanted to kind of leave us before we do some Q&A with one of my favorite anecdotes about growing and how we can go further and deal with change as we try to care for ourselves. So picture this, okay? A woman is on this challenging hike, okay? And she comes across a river, just like this one in the picture. And she has come so far on her journey and she has worked really hard. Well, the current in the river is really fast moving. It's very strong. And she wants to get across the river, but she doesn't have anything to get across the river with. Okay. So she could sit there and feel anxious and sad and upset that she's now stuck, or she can build a raft. And that's what this woman chooses to do. Okay. So she starts to gather lots of bamboo and finding some vines. She actually ties the bamboo together and she starts building this raft, making sure it's big enough for her to kind of lay across. And she even does a little test in the shallow water to check that it stays up in the water, and it does. Well, she jumps onto this raft, and through the very turbulent river, she gets to the other side with some struggle. And when she's on the other side, she feels so grateful that she had this raft, that she built it, and that this raft helped her cross the river. Okay. So she says to herself, I have to take this raft with me everywhere. Like, this thing saved my life. And so what does she do? She straps the raft to her back and she starts walking. And as she walks a couple hundred feet, okay, she sees she's now in this densely wooded forest with tons of trees. Like, I'm talking, these trees are planted right next to each other. All right. And so she's trying with her raft to push through, to squish through these trees, and she can't. And suddenly she makes this realization. And she's like, this raft that got me here is not going to help me get through this. I have to let go of it. I have to let go of the thing that actually saved me in the past because it's no longer relevant today. And I think the wisdom here for all of us is what helped you survive, what helped you juggle in the past is not something you have to cling onto. That it may not be the same thing that helps you really thrive and survive today or even tomorrow. So here's to really evolving the different tools we use, to being willing to try new things and really celebrating our wins along the way. But how about you all? Please share your questions with me. We have just a few minutes. I hope you liked that story and take some of it, what I do, what I find so valuable, which is that remember all of the challenges you've already overcome. Remind yourself that that challenge that you may be facing now is most likely temporary, right? And you can grow and go further, but it might require you to let go of that old stuff. And I'm so happy, Chelsea, you like this story and that you got the lesson from it. What served us in the past doesn't necessarily serve us now. How about you? What are your questions on this as you think about maybe doing some of these things that we looked at today, leaning into a strength, asking for help, that cringy, uncomfortable thing for a lot of us, investing in your support net? What is something that might be on your mind? Maybe a challenge you find or something you appreciate most about one of these techniques, or a question you have. Let us know. Nisa, definitely working on creating and maintaining boundaries. Yeah, I support you and salute you in that. And remember, the thing about boundaries is it really starts with us making it okay before others, get that boundary enforced or communicated, or whether or not they approve it. It really starts with us saying, I'm entitled to my comfort or my need getting met or the hours that I work looking this way, right? Boundaries can't happen if we don't start there. Any questions, please send them my way if you have them. I don't see any at the moment. But given that, I'm going to end there, let you all go, and I'm wishing you all lots of good self-care, well-being as you go on your journeys and you juggle the many things in your life. I can't wait to see you all next month. Thank you for being here and lead on.